I am live. Today is the 5th of June 2024. It's Wednesday, and I'm reading The Laird and the Lady. It's a romantic novel, a story about ghosts and castles by Joan Marshall Grant. She wrote books about her previous lives, her previous incarnations, seven books. She passed away in 1989. This is her one novel, and we are in the second part of this book, chapter 17, Miss Blenkinsop. Neither Rowan nor Georgina was hungry, but meals were part of the routine, so they ate cold grouse and salad followed by apple tart. He knew she shared his anxiety, for twice she said, "It's very sensible for Marylda to go for a walk. It would have been silly to stay in bed when she's got nothing worse than a headache. But I hope she remembered to take some biscuits with her. I'll stroll out to meet her after lunch," he tried to sound casual. Did Agnes happen to notice which way she went? Mrs. MacTaggart says she went towards the kitchen garden, but Anderson hasn't seen her, so she might have gone down to the river or turned up through the birchwood. Probably down the river. It would be typical of her to go to the place where something unpleasant happened, just to prove to herself that she isn't frightened. I hope she's not fishing. She's not. I looked in the gun room and her rod's still there. Georgina watched him stride across the park and knew he was forcing himself to keep an unhurried pace until he was out of sight of the windows. 2 village boys were beside the white pool, but neither of them had seen Marylda. He went upstream, his voice echoing back from the mist when he shouted for her. He realized he was running and made himself stop to light his pipe. 3 matches went out before he could draw steadily instead of watching the brown spate driving down between the rocks. Emilie drowned herself. But Marylda isn't Emilie. This river isn't the Seine. She was never afraid of the Seine. We used to lean on the parapet of the bridges to watch the lights reflected in the water. If she had felt Emilie there, she would have been afraid. Should I have warned her about Emilie before I brought her to Cloud? But I asked her if she believed in ghosts even before I told her I was in love with her. She laughed, as though I was joking. She said the only thing missing in the chateau was a romantic haunt. How could I have known that I would bring her into danger? Of course, she's not in danger unless I allow myself to believe that her destiny is linked with Emilie's. There is a link, but I have got to break it before she realizes it exists. Poor darling, she must have felt alien here at first, and so associated herself with the other American bride. That's what has happened. Every time she hears anything about Hector's wife, she feels it's a dig at herself. Damn Janet, it's mostly her fault. What a bloody fool I was to let her stay here when I first thought Marylda home. Duncan tried to warn me, but I wouldn't listen. Too stupid to take any advice, and now I've hurt her. I'll never find her in the mist. She's not home if she's not home by 5, no, by 4:30, I'll take everyone to look for her. We'll quarter the ground until I will find her. Angela might follow her trail. No, that fool dog couldn't find a grouse at 10 yards. When we find her, I'll explain that I was worried in case she'd slipped and sprained her ankle. No, don't say you were afraid. She might have had another accident. Did Emilie get lost? Dare I ask, Georgina? No, the old lady has got enough on her plate at the moment without adding to it. Can't have been easy to keep quiet for nearly 50 years and to lie through her teeth because she thought it would help. I mustn't start the search before 4 at the earliest, or else Marylda will feel she's being watched. Cloud would feel like a prison if she couldn't even go out for a walk without feeling she had to explain. I'd better hurry back to the house. She's probably there already, having tea with Georgina in the library. Unless I keep calm, it's going to be much more difficult for both of them. I mustn't let either of them know I'm windy. When Georgina heard him come into the hall, she snatched up a book. You mustn't realize I'm worried. We can't have a tea early. We can have tea early. She rang the bell, lit a cigarette and threw it away when she saw her hand was shaking. "Marylda back yet?" he asked as he opened the door. "No, but she'll be in soon. I'll tell Agnes to be sure the water is hot. She may want a bath as soon as she gets home." He watched her warm the teapot, measure 3 spoonfuls of tea from the tortoise-shell caddy, pour water from the silver kettle that bubbled over the blue flame of the spirit lamp. They each ate a scone and put the covered dish on a trivet by the fire. "She'll be back soon," said Rowan. "Of course, dear. Remember how you used to scold me if I dared to fuss when you were out late?" When they heard Marylda coming along the passage from the gun-room, the relief was so sharp that to relax required a deliberate muscular effort. She came into the room, her hair still bright with water drops. "No, I don't want any tea. I'd like a drink later, after I've told you my hideous secret." She tried to say it lightly, but they both saw how tense she was. "If you turn me out of the house, I won't blame you. But please, will you give me a chance to explain?" Rowan put his arm around her shoulders. "Darling, whatever it is, get it off your chest, and as for turning you out, well, if you try to go, I'll haul you back by your hair. Don't be nice to me, or I shall crack. I've lied to you both, and you despise liars." "Nonsense," said Georgina. Everyone lies, and anyone who says they never do is either a conceited prick or a proven liar. I've been telling Rowan some of my lies today. I'm an expert." "What have you been doing, darling?" said Rowan. "If you've murdered anyone, we'll pop out and dispose of the corpse. And if it's only larceny, who could be more helpful than Georgina and I, who come from generations of cattle thieves?" "My real name isn't Marylda Lovell." "Of course it isn't. It's Marylda Cairdry," said Rowan. Then he stiffened. "You mean you were married before?" And with an effort he added, "But lots of people make a dud first married. Were you a widow or divorced?" "Neither," she said, and managed to smile. "No, darling, you are my first and only husband, and my first and only lover too, if that's any comfort." "It is," he said fervently. "I can't see that anything else is really at all important." "That's just the point. It isn't important if only you'll believe it." "As an accomplished liar, I'm not such a fool as not to recognize truth when I see it," said Georgina. "And I'm not nearly so stuffy as I pretend to be, nor so blind. Ask Rowan if you don't believe me." "You can tell anything to Georgina," he assured her. "To be honest, I didn't realize it till this morning, but it's a fact." They watched Marylda compassionately. She was about to tell them she had seen Emilie. They must both be very careful to say exactly the right thing. Better take it as quite natural, but never let her know it was dangerous. "Well," said Rowan gently, "out with a hideous secret." "I'm not poor. I'm quite disgustingly rich. I lied about it because I thought Rowan wouldn't marry me if he knew." "Well, I'll be damned," explained Rowan. "I think it was most sensible of you," said Georgina calmly, "and entirely justified. If Rowan had known you were rich, he'd have been off like a scalded cat. And at the risk of trying to appear clever after the event, I'm not in the least surprised." "But how did you guess?" "My dear, only someone brought up in the habit of money would treat a mink coat as though it were rabbit. When you first came here and I was trying my hardest to dislike you, I thought you probably hadn't bought the coat yourself." She chuckled. "Janet was convinced you were an adventuress. Janet is frequently a fool." "But it's worse than being rich," said Marylda forlornly. "I changed my name to Lovell because it was so horrid being an heiress and never having a chance to be liked as a person. That's why it was wonderful when Rowan fell in love with me. I couldn't make myself tell him the truth in case he was cross." "And so I should have been," admitted Rowan, "until you taught me that loving leaves no room for fool's pride." "Darling, oh my darling, you're so wonderful to me. Georgina watched them kiss each other with gratitude that they didn't mind her being there. And I tried to drive her away, she thought, when it would have killed the boy to lose her. Money is very useful, she said. No one knows better than I do how difficult it is to cope with the drab inelasticity of shillings. Rowan sat down and pulled his wife onto his lap. So, you're an heiress, married to a poor devoted Scot who adores you. Isn't that fun? I'm not going to be in the least pompous. We'll spend your improbable wealth and enjoy every penny. After we've mended the roof, will there be enough to buy a new car? I'm an American heiress, darling, plenty for lots of cars and acres of roofs. She looked at Georgina with affection and mock severity. You rubbed it in, my being American. If I'd admitted being the second American heiress, it might have been the last straw. At times you made me feel like a Hottentot with a ring through my nose. I was a bitch, said Georgina, an expression I seldom use, for I consider it insulting to Lassie and Angela. It isn't an insult, not in the way it applies to you. A bitch defends its young, and you were trying to defend Rowan against me. We only fought because we didn't realize we'd both defend him against anything. What about me doing a bit of defending too? Protested Rowan. Keeping you two from each other's throats hasn't been easy, and if you doubt my capacities, you'd better consider how Jock tore into the sheepdog that came sniffing round the kennels. No sheepdogs, promise, she said. At least not unless you throw me out when I told you who I am. Was she playing it wrong, deliberately letting herself treat this confession as comedy instead of the high tragedy she had expected? And you are my granddaughter, said Georgina. But I'm also Emilie's niece. I was Marylda Blenkinsop. Oh, my poor child, said Georgina. Oh, my poor dear child. I didn't know until this morning when I went for the second time to the sealed room. I found a photograph of my father in the desk. Did you climb over the roofs and get in through the tower door? Asked Georgina. Yes, but how did you know? I used to, though I haven't done it for a long time. You don't hate me for it? You understand? I understand. Georgina's voice was very gentle. Marylda looked into her clear eyes, thinking, can it be so easy as this? All that terror, all those lies suddenly no more substantial than mist when the sun climbs high. You know I was Miss Blenkinsop and you still love me, she said. What courage it required to make that clear-cut demand. Of course we love you. Rowan kept his arms in exactly the same position with a meticulous control of muscle. Mustn't let her know he was terrified to discover that the link between her and Emilie existed even in heredity. Mustn't let her know that from now on he would be afraid to let her out of his sight in case she was caught up in Emilie's vortex, so that she should not see the fear in his eyes. He bent down to unlace her shoes. Darling, your stockings are soaking. You'd better pop upstairs. I'll risk it. Darling, your stockings are soaking. You'd better pop upstairs and boil yourself in a bath. I'll come up and take the tap end. She slid off his lap, pulled off her other brogue, paused at the door. I love you both enormously, she said, which is an example of British understatement. They were silent until they were sure she had reached the staircase. So, now we know why the link between them is so strong, said Georgina. Rowan went across to the cupboard that Hector had made behind one of the bookshelves, poured whiskey into a glass, came back to stand in front of the fire. I believe, he said, that providing one loves enough, there are no impossibilities. I believe praying really works, which I admit sounds nonsense, considering the hours we have wasted mumbling in the kirk. I'm going to drink a toast, and for the first time I recognize what a toast implies, a loyalty which demands more than logical fulfillment. He raised his glass. To Miss Blenkinsop, may God give freedom to her soul. Georgina took the glass from his hand, to the Mrs. Blenkinsop, and in their name to Cloud. So that was the end of part 2. The next part is part 3, invitation to a ball.